Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to begin by asking Nancy Consent to enter in the record letters that I've received, and our staffs can work together to make sure we're not duplicating that you see, if you would.
Without objection.
Thank you. And I also wanted to announce, and I neglected my opening statement, that Senators Reed from Rhode Island and Warner from Virginia both have responsibilities as ranking members on armed services and intelligence to do hearings on confirmation hearings today, and could not join us, but wanted to be here. So I wanted to say that. Thank you for your statements. I appreciate the many of the ideas and goals you expressed. Some, however, as you, I think, know by now, are inconsistent with statements you've made over the past few years. If confirmed, I think you understand you'll be held to the ideas you've expressed today, not ones necessarily you may have written or talked about in a presidential race. You testified that you want to make communities more inclusive. This seems at odds with one of the only housing policies that prior to this nomination that you have taken a public stand on, fair housing. As I mentioned, your 2015 column in the Washington Times critiqued HUD's then new rule to affirmatively further fair housing. You characterized that rule as a government-engineered attempt to legislate racial equality. You likened it to a failed socialist experiment. Please elaborate for this committee on your view of HUD's role implementing the Fair Housing Act, especially including the requirement that HUD's grantees affirmatively further fair housing.
Well, thank you, Senator Brown, for that question and an opportunity to actually explain that, because it has been distorted by many people. As you probably know, that act says that we want people who are receiving HUD grants to look around and see if they find anything that looks like discrimination. And then we want them to come up with a solution on how to solve the problem. They're not responding to people saying that there's a problem. They're saying, go and look for a problem and then give us a solution. And what I believe to be the case is we have people sitting around desks in Washington, D.C., deciding on how things should be done. You know, telling mayors and commissioners and people, you need to build this place right here, and you need to put these kind of people in it. What I would encourage, I don't have any problem whatsoever with affirmative action or at least, you know, integration. I have no problem with that at all. But I do have a problem with people on high dictating it when they don't know anything about what's going on in the area. We have local HUD officials, and we have people who can assess what the problems are in their area, and working with local officials can come up with much better solutions than a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter program from people in Washington, D.C. That's the part
sorry, Dr. Carson, with 5 minutes. Your objection is not to affirmatively further. Your objection is whether that's done from Washington or the HUD office in Columbus, Ohio.
My objection is central dictation to people's lives.
Let me explore further along those same lines. I want to hear your views on the housing rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people. These people also face discrimination, as you know, and alarmingly high rates of youth homelessness and bullying. Your statement mentions your desire to improve the lives of all families and communities, quote, no matter their race, creed, color, or orientation. Yet you have in the past raised questions about whether LGBTQ people should enjoy the same rights as everyone else. Do you believe that HUD has a duty to take actions that promote equal access to housing opportunities for LGBTQ people?
If confirmed in this position, of course I would enforce all the laws of the land. And I believe that all Americans, regardless of any of the things that you mentioned, should be protected by the law. What I have mentioned in the past is the fact that no one gets extra rights. Extra rights means you get to redefine everything for everybody else. That, to me, doesn't seem to be very democratic.
That's what we're talking about, but I'm glad to hear you say that moving forward, you will respect that.
Absolutely.
Last question, Mr. Chair, as time runs short. We've seen a dramatic increase in affordable housing needs in this country, as you've pointed out, Dr. Carson, in recent years. 11 million families, as I said earlier, a quarter of all renters pay more than half their income for housing, struggling to make ends meet. One thing goes wrong, a temporary layoff, hours cut back, illness, they lose their home. We talked in my office about the Matthew Desmond book, Evicted, which I hope you will read, and I know some of your staff has already.
Yes.
About people's lives being turned upside down when they're evicted. Their children's school district changes, they lose their possessions, they never quite catch up again, their credit, all of those things that happen when half of their income goes to housing. President, I am surprised the President-elect's urban agenda does not even mention housing, as we talked about. You had told me about your conversations with the President-elect about an urban agenda. Have you had discussions with him about your plans for housing or his plans for housing? Tell us what those plans, tell us what plans have come from those discussions.
Yes, yes, we have talked. In fact, we talked this morning. You have to attack the problem that you describe from both ends. There are a large number of people spending 30 to 50% of their income on housing, and that's an unacceptable number. So what we have to do is either raise their income or decrease the cost of the housing. I think both of those areas are areas that we need to work upon.
Do you support raising the minimum wage, and do you support the overtime rule, which in my state alone or in your home state of Michigan meant more than $100,000 in each state? People got raises that are making $30,000 and $40,000 a year. If we're talking about raising income, particularly the overtime rule would mean real dollars in people's pockets that are working 50 and 60 hours a week. Do you support those?
I support creating an environment that encourages entrepreneurial risk-taking and capital investment, which are the engines that drove America from no place to the pinnacle of the world in record time.
So I guess that means you don't support the overtime rule or the minimum wage?
It means exactly that my philosophy is that we can increase people's minimum wages by increasing opportunities for them and creating an environment where those opportunities exist rather than artificially trying to change it.
Last point, I don't think it's artificial that someone that works 50 or 60 hours a week and has been classified as management can work those hours over 40, making $35,000 a year and not get paid for those hours. I don't think that's artificial when the employer has denied them that straight time or especially time and a half.
I agree it's not artificial, but you create the right environment, that employer will have to pay them more because the competition will require it of him.